Good morning. My name is Jamie Gage. I'm here on Halloween Day, 2024, just a few days before the election. And I'm here for a discussion with a candidate for both U.S. Senate and for Bennington County State Senate, Steve Barry. Welcome, Steve.
Thanks very much for allowing me to be here today.
Absolutely.
And thanks to GNAT, our local television station. They're fabulous, and I've always appreciated all the work they've done, Tammy Riley and her crew.
Fantastic. Yeah, this is my first time here. I've seen a number of shows here. I've seen The Kitchen quite a bit with Amy Chamberlain's show, and I'm aware of the good work GNAT does, so thank you very much, GNAT. So we wanted to talk a little bit about the campaign and the election here in the next few days, and kind of talk about why you are entering both the U.S. Senate race against Bernie Sanders and Gerald Malloy, and a number of other candidates also, and the Bennington County State Senate seat, which is wide open as well. There are 2 Senate seats available, and just wanted to get a perspective from your world as to why you've thrown your hat in these races.
Okay, so there's a reason why I probably shouldn't do it, and it comes out because of something that someone said to me many years ago, which was profound, I thought. He said, if you want to be seen, you stand up. If you want to be heard, you speak up. If you want to be loved, sit down and shut up. And so I guess the love aspect there is less important than being heard, particularly because of the issues that are involved with what's going on in the world right now. Particularly what's happening in national politics, which is so nasty, with people blaming and demonizing each other, with the erosion slowly of democracy and our rights and freedoms. That's a deep concern for me. The fact that we are involved with endless wars and have been since my growing up years. We had a chance in 1961 after the Bay of Pigs when President Kennedy said that, and was disgusted. He took the blame for Bay of Pigs, but he knew that behind it was a CIA operation. And he was bringing that out, and he didn't want to have war, and he wanted to have global peace. But it went in another direction, the direction that President Eisenhower had warned against, and that's what we have right now. We have war all around the world and has continued forever. So that's an issue that needs to be brought up, which is not being brought up by Bernie Sanders. He was late to the table in talking about Palestine and Gaza, although he's come out very strongly now. But he votes for the budget, he votes for war to continue. And when you have war out there in the world, what you have is also violence that comes trickling back at home. And so you can't have fighting going on in different parts of the world and then expect to have peace at home when there's so much anxiety and worry and concern here at home. In terms of my issues in Vermont, I would say that I'm concerned about the health of our citizens. I deal on a regular, almost daily basis with people in my district who have been ill or are ill because of atrazine in the water, because of glyphosate that has been spread on the fields. And so you can't have healthy food, healthy soil, healthy water, healthy air. I'm concerned about that. I actually had that on my ticket when I ran in 2014 and became a legislator in Vermont. It was on clean water, clean soil, clean air, and healthy people. And I'm still there. I haven't gotten off that track, and that's really important, the health part. And I've been very fortunate because I've been recognized for my stance on health, and I've been receiving high accolades on a national level for the health freedom that I am in favor of. So that's important to me, the health issue. Probably most important because America is so sick and they can't afford the drugs. Bernie's solution is to make sure that you have less payment for pharmaceuticals. I can give you an example. In other countries, the pharmaceutical industry costs for 1 month for a particular drug for diabetes $60. My friend in Rupert has to pay $250. He's seeking to get it down to $100, and without the insurance, that same drug costs $1,100. That's the same drug, $60 in foreign countries,
Yep.
and with a discount,
here.
maybe $100 here with a discount, a
That
copay,
he's fighting
etc.
for. Right. No.
But normally $250 with insurance.
Yep.
But if you don't have insurance, it's $1,100.
Yep.
So that just gives you an overview of the way in which pharmaceuticals. And I wish I brought my little letter I got in the mail the other day from
I saw that. We could talk about that. The Health Freedom endorsement that you received.
Well,
right?
yeah, no, not that one, but a bill that I received in the mail. But we can talk about the health freedom.
Yeah,
but a
yeah,
bill I
we'll
received
get
in the
that
mail. I was told by my primary physician to go down to Bennington to get some work done on my skin, a dermatology check. Actually, it was for allergies. So I went in, checked in, everything was great. The doctor came in, and I told her why I was there, and she said, "Oh, I'm a dermatologist, not an allergist. You need to go to an allergist." I said, "Okay." So I wasn't in the office more than 15 minutes. Received a bill. I owed $15.95, and the hospital insurance, or the insurance company, was billed $119.
So for 15 minutes, you had a $135
Right.
bill ultimately.
I wish I brought
That's
it.
a pretty good rate. That's $540 an hour they're getting there.
So, so it's either the healthcare company, the hospital is making money, or the insurance company is making money, because it works both ways. The doctor needs to be paid. I'm for the public option. I think that you should be able to have the doctor that you want, and you can choose, but this should be handled either statewide or federally, so that you're not paying for the middleman.
Right.
The middleman is where all the money is going, and the middleman switches from the insurance company to the hospital.
Right.
And
that's just one industry too, and the confluence of all of these issues, starting, you say, with the military, of course, is a big part of this, right? Going back, you mentioned that you were in the legislature. Now, I understand you were a Democrat when you were in Montpelier as a state representative here in Bennington County. You're not a Democrat anymore. You're running as what you call a true independent.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, that's because Bernie, for years, has been calling himself an independent. And I always believed that. I thought that he had some flexibility and was open-minded. But I've changed my understanding of Bernie. I think Bernie he's a socialist, so he calls himself a democratic socialist. I'm not sure what that is. Progressive. When he ran in the primary, he ran as a Democrat. But in the general election on November 5th, he's running as an independent. Well, he's not an independent because the DNC has actually determined what he should be doing, and he's getting rewarded by the DNC for having been enfolded into the Democratic Party. So he's really not an independent. I am, and so I don't have to stay in a particular lane. If you're being supported by the Democrats, then the assumption is you're going to be agreeing with all of the agendas that are being passed to you. If you're running as a Republican, you're also getting supported by the Republicans, and so you have to pretty much stay in your lane for what the Republican Party wants you to say and do. I'm a free man. And so that means I can say pretty much what I would like to do and what I think is right. And I have that flexibility without having to be beholden to a particular party. And that gives me the freedom that Bernie, for example, does not have. Bernie is way over on the scale in terms of what he says that appeals to people that are maybe Democrats. I certainly have found appeals in so much of what he said, but Bernie used to talk about millionaires paying their fair share, and then it switched to billionaires. Bernie has $36 million in this campaign fund, or did to begin with. Subsequently,
not a fact that he probably talks about too much, because he's always railing against the millionaires and now billionaires. But
it's billionaires
obviously
now. It's not millionaires,
right,
because
he is one now.
Well, yeah, and so it was Gerald Malloy at a debate recently who said, I have to go to another debate with Bernie right now, so he had to leave what he was doing with us on Town Meeting TV. But he indicated that he spent $500,000 on his campaign or more. And Bernie, he said, and I have no way of knowing this because I haven't looked at the figures lately. I knew he had 36 million, but Malloy said he spent $6 million on this campaign, and I have no idea. But I'm just saying that's a lot of money. What about an average Vermonter who, who's just trying to
right. So, for example, you've probably spent a little less than that, I would guess.
Yeah. Well, one of the reasons for that is that I think that we should not be out there asking people for money. I think that should be done by the government. The government should take care, and there should be an equal playing field so that everybody has a voice and a vote and the same amount of money to deal with. Not all of these special interest groups that are giving money like we've heard from, Becca Ballant has received a lot of money from a particular source. But everybody, I guess, does, except I haven't gotten any money, and I'm not interested in any money from any political party or any outside source. And so I'm not even going to fundraise for myself because I have a value in money going to people, for example, who are poor.
So to that point, and your background, not interested in taking special interest money, totally get that and appreciate, respect it. Your background, through your many years, I happen to know a little bit about you, having done some work across the country, not just here in Vermont. But give us a little bit about that and the kinds of people that you've served, and how have you afforded to be able to do that, and what kinds of experiences have you had?
Okay. So I began my career as a pastor in northern Vermont. I was licensed by the United Church of Christ, and I served two little rural parishes, one in Eden and one in Northup Park. And
this is up in central Vermont.
Yeah, in Lamoille County, the very northern part of Lamoille
very rural.
County. Yeah, very rural. And there was a lot of rural poverty. Most of the people there were farmers, although the dairy farms, by the time I got there, were struggling, and people were working sometimes two jobs.
This is the mid-'70s?
Yeah, the mid-'70s, 74 through 76. I got my degree at Johnson State College. I'd started many years before, and I traveled around, and I went to Jung Institute in Zurich, and I went to Hope College in Holland, Michigan. I took some class at Emerson College, got to know, the only friend I made there was Jay Leno. We had lunch every Thursday at this little Greasy Spoon on Charles Street. And that's
where he got his most famous line, I'm thinking, because there was some comedian years ago used to say, Jay Leno, you have an interview with him and he's going to ask you what you had for lunch. So, what'd you have for lunch? And that's kind of like that. So that all started with you.
I can vouch for it. I can say, Jay Leno is a meatitarian. Or he was a meatitarian.
Well, with a chin like that, you don't grow that.
But he was an Italian family. He shouldn't, it should be like, hey, let's, but it wasn't like meatballs that he was ordering at lunch. It was steak. It was, something which was, anyway. That was Jay, and I know Jay, and so I started out in rural Vermont, and I started out where people really had issues of how to make ends meet. Rural poverty, I saw for the first time. When I visited homes, I visited a lot of trailers, and I brought food. I developed a big youth group. So we had about 45 kids from a couple of towns that came by, from Eden and North Hyde Park and beyond, that want to be involved in this group. So we would raise money. We'd go right now, this time of year, we'd pick apples from the scrub apple trees in the old foundations in Vermont. What we do is we put them in the back of a pickup truck. Then there was a cider press in Waterville, and we'd drive over to the Waterville cider press. We'd bring all these jugs, gallon jugs, and then we would have that pressed. And then we would take those jugs and we would bring it over to Stubb's Stopover. Stubb Earl ran, he was a legislator back in the 70s, and he was a character, good friend of mine.
Great Vermont name, Stubb Earl.
Stubb Earl, yeah, Ernest Stubb Earl, and great friend of mine. And so Stubb would sell some of that, and we would distribute other parts, and we would have fundraisers. And then with the funds, I would buy all of these fruits and vegetables, and then we would distribute that to all the people that we knew who were really, really poor, and there were a lot of them, and to shut-ins. And so I really was submersed in what the issues were in terms of rural poverty. I remember a family that got burned out on East Hill, and so we had a fundraiser. Our youth group put on a fundraiser for them, and we raised it was in the little elementary schoolhouse. And we raised hundreds of dollars, and we had a blast. It was so fun. It was a real community thing. We packed that place. It was just hundreds of people there, and we raised money for this family, and we got clothes for them, and we did the right thing, and that's the way Vermonters were, and that's the way rural Vermonters are. They really care. But there's a lot of poverty that I was introduced to. Then when I left, I got my degree. I went from Eden and North Hyde Park in the congregational churches where I served as pastor for 2 years. I went to Yale, and while I was at Yale, I was a teaching assistant there with Henry Nouwen, who was a very famous author and who was my professor. He changed my life. And then I went to inner city. I was going to go to Rupert, Vermont. And I'd come up and had a little visit in Rupert and met with a woman who just died, Ellen Lowry. She was on the search committee, and I went to the farmhouse, the Lowry farmhouse, and out on East Street. And so I wanted to come to Rupert. I went back and all excited about that. And Henry Nouwen looked at me and said, "Steve, you've been there, you've done that. You have to go to the inner city."
Right.
And so I went to the inner city. I went to St. Louis, and I went to the first church that integrated west of the Mississippi River, to Pilgrim Congregational Church in St. Louis, Missouri. And I was in the city, and it was a biracial church, 60% white, 40% black. So that was my introduction to the African American community.
And the gateway city.
And it was a remarkable experience for me. But I did something there that I thought was really important, and it turned out to be really important. And that is that I saw the needs around the neighborhood, because I'd walk the neighborhood and so on. And I found out that we needed to have a soup kitchen. And it's too bad in 1980s that you need to have a soup kitchen. But that was the case. So I started a soup kitchen at Pilgrim Congregational Church in St. Louis. That has continued. I'm not sure if it's operative now, but as of 4 years ago, it was still operative. And it served millions and millions of meals over the course of those decades in St. Louis. So I know about city poverty too, and I would try to address city poverty. So that has been an issue for me over the years. And when I went to New York City from St. Louis, I also tried to make sure that people were taken care of. We had a very we were like a little United Nations church that I was a pastor of there. And then I became a senior minister at First Congregational Church Los Angeles, the biggest congregational church on the West Coast. And there was a lot of poverty around me. The whole Lafayette Park, right next to First Congregational, LA, was just, it was just a mess. There was so much drugs, so much problems. And we had a school.
And this is roughly about what time?
This was at the decade of the 90s.
Yep, yep.
And so what I did was I developed a relationship with the Los Angeles Police Department. Later on, I became a chaplain in the Los Angeles Police Department, the Rampart Division, to clean up that. And it was a real important time because we had the Rodney King incident and then the political unrest and buildings were burning around, and I had to run an organization. We had a school of K through 12, the most ethnically diverse private school in the country at that time. I had a big budget. I had a lot of ministers under me. I was a young guy. I was 40 years old when I went there. And, I dealt with poverty there. And rural poverty and city poverty, they come together when people are poor. It doesn't matter whether you're white or black or another color. It doesn't matter. If you don't have enough money to live on, you become pretty desperate. And I dealt with homeless people. I dealt with all that. But I've done that ever since I started ministry, except I wasn't dealing with the homeless so much in northern Vermont. Now, having come back to Vermont 20 years ago, I dealt with it again. But yeah, I've dealt with a lot of that. But I got a decent salary when I was in Los Angeles as a senior minister. By no means what a mega church gets, although I had 1,000-something members. But I had a camp in the San Bernardino Mountains. So what I did with poverty there, I would take the inner city youth, and at our camp, I had developed partnerships with the LAPD, but also with the American Youth Foundation, and also with Royal Family Kids Camp to get children and youth up to our beautiful camp and conference center at Cedar Lake and Big Bear. We had 270 acres and raised money for another building, did all of that. But I had a big staff, I had a big budget, millions and millions of dollars that I had to work with, but I got a decent salary at that time. I came back to Vermont, not so much. And then, anyway, the long and the short of it is that I wanted to give as much as I could to everybody who was much more needy than myself, but I was able to save some money. And so while I'm not living largely by middle-class standards, I am very, very fortunate, and I try to give as much as I can away to those who are much less fortunate than I am. And there are so many more people like that than, and I have
yeah,
so much.
Yeah, that sounds like that's a consistent thread throughout your whole professional experience, is serving the most vulnerable,
yes,
which has long been a hallmark of the left politically and whatnot.
Yes.
We could talk about that later, but your platform currently is based on three main issues, and affordability is one of them.
Yeah.
What are the other two, which you've already mentioned, both of them?
Well, it's sovereignty. It's our freedoms, which I think we're losing. That those are eroding, and I'm very deeply concerned about that. And I've mentioned just briefly health and affordability, but it's all under the rubric of ending these endless wars. Because if you keep on having wars, you can't have money for at home. And if your budget is $883 billion this year, and then you are going for another $100 billion to Ukraine this week, and then more for Israel next week, and who knows what else. It's just not doable.
Do you think the old argument about freedom comes, because of our military? Is that an old and tired saw that ought to be retired? Because what you seem to be saying is it's impacting everything downstream of that.
Oh, it does. Yeah, no question about it. I can't believe, and part of the reason why I'm not a Democrat right now is I don't recognize them. They've turned into the war party. I'm looking and saying, Dick Cheney is a Democrat?
Right.
how did that happen?
Yeah.
Dick Cheney is the biggest warmonger I've ever seen. He became fabulously wealthy on the death and destruction of people in another country who we know didn't have the weapons of mass destruction. And he became fabulous. And so many people became fabulously wealthy during that period of time, all because of destroying somebody else. And look at our young men and women of the different wars that have come back, and they uphold and do their very best, and I honor them, but they're not treated with the respect that they need to be treated with when they come home. They need to be cared for with mental health and with other health-related issues and propped up and supported, and they should be elevated. These are our heroes, but not the government that put them in that position. Right. That's not a hero.
Right, and that's it. It goes back to, go ahead, sir.
Oh, no, I just am not for the government as it stands right now, and for the government to continue this peace through strength. I mean, that's what Gerald Malloy is running on. In part, right, peace through strength. No, Gerald, that's not right. That doesn't work. It hasn't worked for 5 decades. That's not where we are anymore. And maybe we never were.
You mentioned middlemen earlier. And that's kind of what I think of when I think of Mr. Malloy in a sense, and it's kind of maybe what you're indicating.
Yeah, I would want people to vote for me.
Kind of middleman.
For Senator for the state, not for Bernie. Or not for Malloy. And I would probably agree with some of the things of both of them. But on the war issue, certainly not with Malloy. And on all the free giveaways without having fiscal responsibility, not for Bernie. I would say vote for an independent. But see, my voice has been quieted. And so that goes back to the censorship issue, but we can talk about that in terms of sovereignty, and freedom.
Yeah, and I have a clip for that later also that I'd like to show, because I did catch your debate a week or so ago, and there's a clip there that's really informative. The other issue that you've got as well, you mentioned before, is health, and you're talking about health in a different way than most people do. I know health care, the single payer option, universal, these are things that are important, but you take it a little deeper, right? And you go to systemic cause and all that stuff in terms of where our health should be derived from, right?
Well, I do, and the reason for that is if you're putting money, all of this money into trying to fix the problem, then you're starting with the wrong premise. Why don't you do the upfront preventative medicine work beforehand? Why not start with nutrition for children in the schools and for people at home? Why not start with healthy diets to eliminate the need for pharmaceuticals later on? Pharmaceuticals are not bad per se, except if you're hooked on them because you have a weakened immune system. And so why not build up healthy immune systems? Part of what was exposed during the pandemic is that there were so much talk about the only option that you can have during this pandemic is to get a vaccination. Why didn't Dr. Levine say, why don't you go out and get some fresh air? Why don't you get some sunshine? Why don't you eat some good vegetables? Why don't you make sure that your diet is really good? Get some exercise. Why wasn't that promoted?
Right. Well, that's a good question. And going back to children's nutrition in school and whatnot, there's been a lot of study in recent years that it suggests that the food pyramid that we were all taught, I grew up in the 70s and 80s, was erroneous. It was not what we should be eating, right? So is there a connection between the messages that are foisted down upon us regarding our health and nutrition and the truth?
Oh, absolutely. And I would, I'm going to refer to this. This is a book called The 100-Year Lie by Randall Fitzgerald, How Food and Medicine Are Destroying Your Health. Now this is an old book. This came out many years ago, but this is an important book. There's many newer books on toxicity, on what's happened. My wife just finished reading one, which is really an eye-opener, because it's gotten far, far, far worse than what's in this book. And this is part of the problem that we're dealing with. If you have sick soil, you can't have healthy food. But they're putting so much herbicides and pesticides on the soil that you're getting food that's toxic. And that's your processed food. And then they put into the processed food not just, high fructose corn syrup, but saccharin and aspartame or whatever they are. I can't keep up with all the additives that they put in. But it makes people fat and it makes people sick. And then they go to the pharmaceutical company to get something that won't make them fat and that won't make them sick. Why not start with affordable, healthy food to begin with? Because even if you're paying for organic food, when you pay for organic food, it costs you more at the store, but it'll cost you far less downstream when it's time for you to get your checkup with a doctor.
Right.
So why not do that?
Much
It's a much smarter way to deal with your life.
Well, let's talk about profit motive then. We have a Secretary of Agriculture now who's been in and out of the lobbyist game with Monsanto, right?
Yeah.
So that's Secretary Vilsack. Talk about the nexus between big pharma, food, and once again the truth. I like the name of this book, The 100. It's funny. I must have subliminally seen that, and that gets me to that very point. Is the truth somehow not being given to us anymore?
Well, and the reason for that is that the government and corporations are ruling the country and ruling the world. Well, what we're living in is a system of domination that has a revolving door between corporations, government, corporations, government, corporations, government, and this is circular, and people are making a huge amount of money on this, but the people of our country are ill because of it, because the insiders have taken over. And what we get is...
Is that the agency capture that RFK
Yes.
Jr. talks about?
Absolutely, yes.
So the insiders...
That's agency capture. And it's happening no matter what area you're talking about. If you're talking about military, then you're talking about Lockheed Martin, you're talking about Raytheon, you're talking about Northrop Grumman, you're talking about Boeing, you're talking about all of those companies that have people that are lobbying for them and spend billions of dollars for them, but also those people get into government. Like Mr. Malloy, who hopes to get into government, has been a contractor for those companies, for Raytheon and Lockheed.
After his long military career.
After his long military career.
Right.
So, but that's the way you keep the system of domination in order. That's the way you continue to do the things that you do that are making America sick. And so making America healthy again is what Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is saying. But one of the reasons why Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is so hated by the Democrats, and I've got a story about this that I'll share with you in a second, is because he exposed so much corruption along the Hudson River and cleaned it up that other corporations saw what he did and how successful he was. And he also sued and won against Monsanto in a big case in California, a couple of them now, billions of dollars. Monsanto had to be bought out by Bayer. It continues to do its thing. But he understood about corporate capture, and he understood what he would do with this corruption of the circular going to government and then out of government into the corporation, like a Dick Cheney, and he wants to put that to an end. Well, the pharmaceutical company doesn't want to put that to an end. Pfizer doesn't want to be banned from the television set. Every night when you go on MSNBC, it's sponsored by Pfizer, sponsored by Pfizer. All during COVID, sponsored by Pfizer. You're getting your shots and you're sponsored by Pfizer and Moderna and AstraZeneca, and they don't want to get out of that. It's too lucrative. So they made, and here's my story. I was in the State House, and Robert F. Kennedy announced that he was going to be coming to speak. The Democrats, of which I was one, were told, you know, he's not a good guy. He's an anti-vaxxer. Well, I had not heard of anti-vax. I hadn't been involved with anything anti-vax. But I thought it was odd that I was being told that I shouldn't go and listen to
And
Robert
this is
F.
again what year, roughly?
This is either, I think it was the spring of 2016. I think that's when he came.
So
could have
over 8
been
years ago.
Could have been later, 2015. But anyway, he came to the Vermont State House, and largely we're told not to go. But that didn't sound like the inquiring minds that Democrats generally have, which is very liberal and open to new ideas and so on. All I heard was he's an anti-vaxxer, anti-vaxxer. I knew him only as an environmentalist. I had read articles about him. I'd read books that had written. I read books that he talked about the neocons and the problem with the Bush administration. I was all on board with Robert F. Kennedy back then, but I was told I shouldn't go hear him. And I said, no, I'm going to go hear him.
And of course, we heard that nonstop over the last 2 years from the left side of the aisle.
Yeah, any way that they could do to discredit him, and then you know it gets into the really stupid stuff. But anyway, he was a really intelligent, thoughtful guy that I began paying attention to. I had met his uncle Ted years before. My sister did something in Massachusetts with him, with Pops by the Sea, and he was there, and so I know the family a little bit, and spent some time down in Centerville and near Hyannis, in Hyannisport. So I knew the family a bit, so I wanted to go hear him and stuff. But I was told that wasn't a good idea and that I probably shouldn't do that. And well, I'm glad I did. And subsequently, I'm glad I've read his books that he has shared. I read the Fauci book by Fauci, and then I read The Real Anthony Fauci by Robert F. Kennedy, which has a huge amount of footnotes. He should have been sued like a million times. But he had so many footnotes that no one came after him because apparently everything he said was real. But it's hard to wade.
But the media doesn't portray that
no,
story.
No,
of course.
He was banned from the New York Times. He was banned from a whole bunch of different places.
Although it was a New York Times bestseller, right?
Yeah,
for
but
many weeks.
Well, yeah, that's not because of them, though. I don't know. It's just because
right. But they banned him. Did they review his book or just kind of immediately?
No, you can't talk about him. He's a verboten name. But if you read Anthony Fauci's book, and if you read his book, and if you look back and do your homework, you can see that not everything that Anthony Fauci said and did was accurate. As a matter of fact, maybe it's worse than maybe it is the biggest that we've faced. I don't know. All I can say is.
You mean the COVID,
COVID stuff,
treatment and narrative
all that stuff,
around
all the stuff that
the solutions.
for example, the Dr. Levine in Vermont said, "Oh, there's no alternative."
Do you think Robert F. Kennedy was kind of a lightning rod for those Democrats whose principles have changed a whole lot over the last 20 years? You mentioned Dick Cheney and the Iraq War, and in my memory, the Democratic Party was aligned fiercely against war then. They were aligned, fiercely for freedom of speech. I remember, Fox News was ridiculed then because it took one side, and the so-called corporate media was still purported to be more or less neutral.
Right.
But then you've got something happened over these many years, and it seems like RFK Jr. was such an emotional target for so many Democrats to point at. and it was like, wait a minute, he was you in the mirror 10 years ago. Why are you hating yourself? It seemed to me during this time, maybe, or something like that.
Well, it's really interesting, Jamie, because I don't know why the phenomenon is there except it's money. The only thing I think was driving this was money, because there's so much money that's gone into, for example, our colleges, our universities, from pharmaceutical companies. Huge amounts of money.
Right, right.
So it's not in their benefit to actually talk against the people that are funding them. That's why, you know, there's a lot of money that comes into the political parties from all of these lobbyists that represent the war machine, that represents big pharma, big banks, big tech, big media.
And that's our money.
And that's taxpayers' money, but you wouldn't know it.
Right.
See,
Our priorities are not.
The senators and the Congress people basically have been elected by a two-party system. It's a duopoly. It's a uniparty. And what that means is that they're all beholden on some sort of level to one of those big corporate, massive, faceless entities that's out there. And so they have to do the bidding, and they're not going to listen to the little taxpayer back home because it's, you know, who are we?
Right.
So, but they're not good stewards of our money.
Right. So on your affordability stuff, this is all connected to to Vermont affordability. That's the biggest. It's the biggest issue here in Vermont in 2024 is the slate of taxes and fees that have been put upon the citizens of Vermont over the last 2 years are unsustainable by most accounts. And you're saying there's a connection here in general with our priorities, it sounds like.
Yeah, I would say absolutely in terms of our priorities. We have a big, huge problem with affordability. We can't afford, people are going to leave Vermont, or already leaving Vermont, because they can't afford to live here, the middle class.
Yep.
And you know, the solution for fixing the problem by some is tax the wealthy. Well, I have a different perspective on that. I think everybody should pay their fair share. So it should be graded in terms of how much money you make, how much money you give to your state and federal government. But my sense is that the wealthiest people, you want to have wealthy people in your state because they contribute a lot.
Yeah, especially here in Vermont, of course.
You don't want to drive them out. So taxing the wealthy, you don't want to have happen here what happened in Norway. They decided to raise $150 million, let's say dollars more, through taxing the wealthiest people. What happened was that those wealthiest people decided to move out of Norway, to move their money elsewhere. And that was over $500 million that they took out of Norway. So you don't want to have that happen in Vermont. You know what I would want to have happen? I would want to have those people who are in charge of, who are the wealthiest people in the United States. I would love to have the law changed that defines 501c3s. Not-for-profit corporations. Not-for-profit corporations, if they're small, like little churches, like little helping organizations, maybe a larger organization like a Habitat for Humanity. But anyway, organizations helping organizations, they should not be immune from taxation. We're actually getting have to pay fees in little churches now too, for if you have more than one employee. Even if it's part-time, you have to pay a fee. Anyway, that's a new law this year. One of the new fees, along with the clean air, clean heat fee
standard and the property taxes.
Property taxes. I mean, they give us many fees. I mean, Democrats, why'd you do that? Anyway, I I think that yeah. I'm really at a loss in terms of the big wealthiest people who need to pay more. But maybe what you should do is just take like the Gates Foundation, the Clinton Foundation, all those big mega foundations get off scot-free from paying taxes, and instead of levying huge amounts of taxes on Bill Gates personally, which I would not disagree with, focus on getting that foundation where he filters all this money into like Vermont Public.
Right, right.
Vermont Public and all of these media things and all of these, you know, he's the biggest landowner, I think, next to the Chinese. The Chinese Communist Party owns the biggest amount of land in our country.
America, yeah.
That or Big H, I'm not sure which is.
I do remember his contributions to media just mushroomed after his scandal in the late 90s with Microsoft and the monopoly lawsuit that he faced. And at that time, apparently he bought up all kinds of media, which is what a lot of billionaires do, I guess, to kind of control the messaging, of course. Affordability in Vermont, you know, sensitive to me. I grew up here in the North Shire area and watched you know, our citizens in the community kind of get enriched in a sense, but at the expense of what? Like, so you're close to food systems. I don't remember. There was one farm in Peru, Vermont, that hung on forever, but that was about it. And the Beatty Farm, and you know, farming has been lost, and so our priorities shift, and so the affordability issue in Vermont, you know, it seems like it is informed by outside interests that are not close to the land, so to speak. And did you see that in the legislature when you were there?
Well, you know what? I'm not sure I saw it in the legislature. But I can come back to that. What I would like to say is, you know, you went to school here at Burn-Burton, and then we went to UVM. So you've seen changes over the years. You're a native Vermonter, 3 or 4 generations, I guess. I don't know. But so you know Vermonters work hard. You know they're really diligent. You know that they're willing to really scrape by just to do the right thing and so on. But I remember back in the years when I was a boy and in my youth, in 1965, you had a lot of farms in Lamoille County. I had dozens and dozens of farms. There were more cows in Vermont at that time still than there were people. But you know, $1 in 1965 is worth $10.
It's purchasing power?
It's purchasing power. See, in 1965, $1 would be worth $10 today.
Right, right.
So here we are, these many years later, and our $1 is worth a tenth of what it was worth in 1965.
Yeah, it's remarkable.
So I just met some migrant workers up in Burlington. And they're telling me they make around $10 an hour. $10 an hour is what they make. They don't make minimum wage. Minimum wage in Vermont is $13.67. They said, well, they're trying to get up to a point where they can make minimum wage. They're making $10 an hour. So you work 12 hours a day, and what do you get? $12.
Yeah.
They're working $12 a day. And these are people, we need people in Vermont working. And we get migrant workers coming in, and we give them $10 a day. $10 a day. You know what a livable wage in Vermont is? It's $23.02. That's as of last February, 2024. Maybe it's, you know, if you need a little padding, you should actually have a livable wage of $25 an hour. We're paying $13.67 an hour. The legislature couldn't even bring it up to $15 minimum wage. And Bernie Sanders is still saying, oh, we have to get to a $15 minimum wage. No, a livable wage in the state of Vermont is $23 plus. That's an affordability issue. Nobody was talking about that except me and Carolyn Brannigan when I was in the State House.
Yeah.
I brought this up, but nobody wanted to talk about it. I said, look at the money that you're paying out. You're disincentivizing people to work. You're giving more people benefits that bring them closer to at that time, $21 an hour than the people who are working. The people who are working have to work 2 or 3 jobs to make it. You have to work at least 68 hours a week for a crummy 1-bedroom apartment.
At the 1367.
At the 1367.
Right.
You need to have a second job.
Right.
You need to work.
Yeah.
You need to work 80 hours, 100 hours a week.
Yeah.
You have to work that.
Yeah.
And that's wrong. That's why people, Vermonters are minus $7,500 per household in the state of Vermont for most Vermonters.
Yeah.
And that's before the Affordable Heat Act stuff, right?
Right.
Which
The
is going to be
renewable energy
all an add-on
standard
to that.
Yeah.
Figure that one out. That's going to be incredibly difficult
Yeah. Yeah.
for anybody to make ends meet. So that's why I'm against it. But affordability, look at, you got that on one level. I went down to AT&T in Bennington. I was talking to the young man there. He was serving there. He was hoping to make money on commissions, but people are buying, and I didn't know this, you buy online, then you go to the store to pick it up, and get it programmed. But he makes money on commissions if he sells the product at the store. He doesn't get it otherwise. They have him down so that he works 38 hours a week, so he can't get any benefits. But this was the capper for me. He said, I went online and I saw the fellow who owns this store. And I said, yeah. He says, yeah. He is from Saudi Arabia, and he was laughing about the fact that he made $5.5 billion last year and didn't pay any taxes to the United States of America.
So he owns a whole bunch of
stores. He owns 250 plus AT&T stores.
Yeah.
He lives in Saudi Arabia, and he was laughing he didn't have to pay any taxes.
Yeah. Yeah.
So affordability has to do with a screwy system that has not been in favor of the working class people, although some people have really had a good speech over many years in the Senate about how they take care of the poor and are fighting for them. No, this is how you fight for them. Get laws that actually do something and make sure that people on the ground are being helped. So affordability is a huge issue. If you want to get into housing, you have to first start off with what can you afford. And you can't afford mortgages right now. The government itself overtaxed the students. The students are in such terrible debt. Should they be let off? No, they should pay something. But all those mortgages, those rates of payment should come down. There should be a year of jubilee, but it's not going to happen. So at least make their paybacks affordable so that they can have a life and aren't indebted for the next 25 years because of student loans, and not having a job makes it more difficult. So it's all tangled up, isn't it? There's so many issues here, but affordability is a major one for Vermonters. I know it personally. I know it from the people I work with who are living on the margins, and the people who rely on Social Security, which we were never supposed to rely on fully. They're in a situation that is almost untenable. They have to choose between their heating, their eating, most of them have their mortgages paid off, or they've inherited their family's house or something. But their medicine. Now their medicine. They can't afford their medicine. Right. A friend of mine has to go without medicine this last month and a half because he couldn't afford medicine. So this is a problem.
So it's a system. It's a system
It's a system.
problem. So you mentioned you referenced the platitudes of helping the poor and the middle class. One of your opponents
Yeah.
that talks about, and he talks about lowering prescription drug costs. That's
Right.
great.
That is
But you're
good. That's
saying
good.
this is let's really earnestly go after the systemic problems here.
There's a system of
Right.
domination.
And,
So
and
we-
I do want to talk to you about the fact that you haven't been involved in any of those
Oh, yeah.
debates with Senator Sanders
yeah.
as well.
Yeah, but I agree with you, absolutely. This is a systemic problem, and we live in a system of domination. But this isn't new. This goes back to biblical times. I mean, the Roman Empire did this. You know,
Which
and
we're
the bread,
compared to
and,
all the
and-
time
and we've
now.
got bread and circuses now. They had bread and circuses then. So you give people a little bit of bread, and then you give them a good show, and then they're in poverty all the rest of the time. Compared to that, Jesus was very much interested in an egalitarian system where everyone had enough to eat and so on. People in the communities in Galilee where he went, they shared what they had. And I remember that in Vermont when my bride and
I do
I were
too.
struggling. We had just a little bit. We had $200 that came in a week as a pastor, and from both churches, and that's what they could afford. Or was it 100? Anyway, it was 100 or 200. That's a big difference, I know. 100, I think. We had a place to live, but we still we ate potatoes a lot, and we had eggs, and it was a big thing if we had some venison, but people would leave vegetables for us. They'd leave canned goods for us. They invited us for Sunday meal. That's what Vermonters did. And I remember that because I worked I went to school, and I had another job with Retired Seniors Volunteer Program, and I plowed driveways, and I tried to make ends meet. And my wife worked at Johnson State College in one of their programs, and together we were able to cobble enough together to make it through. But that's what everybody was doing.
Yeah, yeah. And
So
there was
this
pride in 'em.
is not a new thing for Vermont, but we took pride in working hard and making sure that we did our very best, and we did.
Yeah.
And my wife was right there with me, and we made sure that our values were in line with the values that the people had, the Vermont values of hard work and virtue and caring about neighbor and all of that. And I learned a lot from them. But I also, in studying the Bible and in studying about how Jesus looked at it, he wanted to uplift the people that were having a hard time and struggling. And he warned them about empire, every step that he had. And so that's in part why I'm running, because I'm not running against a Bernie Sanders, really, or against Gerald Malloy, really. I'm running against a system that keeps them also as parts of an important element to keep the system in place. And I'm not interested in keeping the system in place. I'm interested in seeing the system change. And the system change by being equitable, by being caring and compassionate, by changing your values to those that are more neighborly, and that's the way you change the world.
Yeah.
And you do it one person at a time, and you do it through having sound and sensible ideas that really take to heart what it means to be a human being, and without labels. So everybody should have that. So that's why I urge people to look at and read the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, adopted by the United Nations back in 1946 when they were still sensible, and see why it was so important for Eleanor Roosevelt and others to actually promote this. But it wasn't promoted. It was promoted for the whole world, not just for America. Everyone should have a way to live. Everyone should be free from want. And the four freedoms of Franklin Delano Roosevelt, that he said, the freedom of speech, all those freedoms need to be preserved, and they're being eroded. And that's another reason why I'm running, because
Well, the freedom of speech issue.
yeah,
That I wanted to circle back to that anyway.
yeah.
Because I'm not sure how much time we have, but you had a great clip last weekend,
Yeah.
or last week,
Yeah.
you did a debate with several other Senate candidates for U.S. Senate.
Yeah.
And Gerald Malloy was there for a time.
Yes.
But then to set this up, I believe he was there for a time, and then about 15 minutes before the end of the debate said, "Oh, I have to leave now." And I think we have a clip.
Before we do closing statement, let's choose a question about democracy. Is America democracy under threat? What are the greatest challenges to our democracy, and how do we rebuild trust in elections? We can start with...
Okay, so yes, American democracy is being threatened because we have a broken and corrupt government. When our leaders are willing to sell their souls for a mess of pottage, then the country turns itself into a mess, and that's what we've got. In 2024, after decades of eroding freedoms through actions like the Patriot Act, the government continues to limit freedom and subvert the U.S. Constitution. Free speech and censorship and the right to informed consent are two examples. We're being censored, all three of us and me, all four of us tonight are being censored from being in a debate with Mr. Malloy, who just left this debate to go and debate Bernie Sanders. We're being censored. So let's just call this what it is. The powerful elites exert influence through dark money. Our greatest challenges to democracy come from elected officials on the inside who do the bidding of corporate entities on the outside. So you've got the WEF, the WHO, Gates Foundation, Clinton Foundation, Klaus Schwab. You own nothing and you'll be happy. This is the group that is trying to grab everything that can't be nailed down, and we're supposed to be left with everything. They assert enormous influence by penetrating our government and influencing people with their money, installing captured clientele of elected officials. Powerful people don't like democracy. So I can say that it was a bit of a shocker when we're sitting there having a debate, and I wasn't expecting Gerald Malloy to come, but that was great of him to do it. And then he said, I have to leave, and the next thing you knew, he was up and out to go to the real debate, which is on NBC. Now, it's interesting that Town Meeting TV, Channel 17
In
Burlington is where Bernie had his start as mayor. Bernie, I found out, actually went into the street and he interviewed people and say, how you doing and what's going on? And then he'd come back to the studio and have his show. And it was a great show, apparently. And he did that for a number of years. And he became very well known, and that was really launched Bernie, and I think that was great.
But he had been extended an invitation by Channel 17, right, to the debate that you were at, but wasn't there.
He declined coming to the place that gave him his first shot. This was Town Meeting TV.
Yeah.
This is really where Bernie should have been, if he was really for the people.
Right.
But
right.
He went to the NBC studio in Burlington instead, and Malloy had to get there. And there's a funny story behind that, but I'm not going to go into it right now. Anyway.
The Bernie that I met at Burton in 1986 would have gone there. That was a person of principle, integrity.
Well, money talks, doesn't it?
I guess so. I always thought he was the one that was going to put a stop to that.
Yeah. Well, the issue for me, and it's an important issue in this campaign, is the issue of censorship. And so I indicated in that debate at the end, and I'll reiterate, that I'm worried that people want to eliminate free speech. And these aren't just people that are radicals in some way or another. These are people with real credibility. You have John Kerry going on a panel with the World Economic Forum saying that democracy is really messy. Well, we know that. I come from the congregational churches, and that's where it all started, with the meeting house tradition, and the town meeting started out of congregational churches in New England. So I'm really acquainted with that. I grew up as a congregational kid. I'm still a Congregationalist, and it's messy because everybody has a right, everybody has a voice, everybody has a vote. That's what we're supposed to be doing. That is being eliminated. So Kerry said at the World Economic Forum panel, it's really, really messy, and we should have ways to limit free speech. What he basically said at the very end is, we need to have a truth arbiter. A truth arbiter. So who's going to arbitrate the truth? Then you had Hillary Clinton say, wondering aloud if people on the internet spreading falsehoods as propaganda, whether or not they should be actually incarcerated because they were spreading misinformation. And then you had Kamala Harris, who said recently that free speech is a privilege. You see how wrong all of this is, how ridiculous this is? And these are coming from people that are very important people. These are coming from people.
And from the left, too. Why do you think it's coming from the left now, or is it a combination? I mean, we most of us know that the government is a combination of both parties.
It's
right?
a duopoly.
Right.
It's a uniparty now.
Right.
But see, they're not taking into account that they would be having problems in the future
Right.
if they weren't in power,
Right.
Which they should take into consideration.
Well, like there was just switching gears for a second here, the directive from the Department of Defense recently was recently reissued, right? About that, and that was by one party, right? And
oh God!
So
yeah.
Talk to that. It's a couple weeks ago. It's DOD 5240 or something.
Yeah. All I can say is that this gives the Department of Defense legal standing to, if they don't like what you're saying and what you're doing, they can actually come in and arrest you. They can do whatever they want. It is a very frightening document, and yeah, I have a lot of information on that, but this is legitimate and
they just did it 2 weeks ago. Or they reissued an old directive, I guess. It
Yeah.
allows them to partner with local civilian law enforcement at their choosing or something. Basically, again, the arbiter. Who's the arbiter? Who chooses this? But this directive, I guess, allows them to partner up with the local police and put down with lethal force, is what I read. Lethal force.
So this starts off with things such as the Patriot Act, which we're told was supposed to be against terrorists in other lands. I remember my phone being tapped because I was speaking to family members in Europe and Switzerland and Germany.
After 9/11.
Back after 9/11. So the Patriot Act came in. But the Patriot Act has been re-upped just recently. So you can surveil all American citizens. And if you don't like what you're hearing as a government, then you can be silenced. And that's what is happening. That's why they took RFK Jr. out. That's why people who had any difference of opinion on vaccinations were silenced. I mean, it keeps on going down. That's one of the reasons why.
That's misinformation, the term that Hillary Clinton apparently used, recently.
Yeah.
What misinformation have we been given by so-called secure or respected authorities? There's been a lot in recent years, I would argue.
Came out recently, yesterday maybe, that Idaho has said no more COVID shots in the state of Idaho.
Based upon
based upon misinformation. Idaho, maybe, yeah. or
Because it
one
was-
state.
well, they were
there
supposed to be
are
safe and
places. There are
effective.
places. Because misinformation. So where do you start with misinformation? Look, everybody has a right to say whatever they want to say, whether it's verifiable or not. You have to do your homework and so on. But I was taught when I was a kid growing up to question authority.
Right.
I was not told to go along with authority and to trust authority. I was told question authority. I questioned authority. I'm still questioning authority, and that's part of the reason why I'm running too, because the authority is part of the system, and the system went in a direction that was warned about by President Eisenhower, General Eisenhower, who said, you have to dismantle the military-industrial complex, and we didn't do it.
JFK, his replacement tried.
That's
I
right.
guess, right.
And he said he would love to shatter the CIA into 1,000 pieces, and they shattered him very quickly after his peace talk. His very famous peace talk.
Yeah.
So So you know Wendell Berry.
Yeah. The
He
nature
must
of all
be
things.
he must be a distant relative of mine, but he has this manifesto called the Mad Farmer Liberation Front. Love the quick profit, the annual raise, vacation with pay, want more of everything ready-made. Be afraid to know your neighbor and to die. And you will have a window in your head. Not even your future will be a mystery anymore. Your mind will be punched in a card and shut away in a little drawer. When they want you to buy something, they will call you. When they want you to die for profit, they will let you know.
Wow.
He goes on, this is the manifesto of Mad Farmer Liberation
I was
Front.
holding on to that window. That keep a window in your mind there. Yeah, it seems like there are powers amassed against the
powers
individual.
that be. That's Ephesians chapter 5. It says, arm yourself. So friends, every day do something that won't compute. Love the Lord, love the world, work for nothing. Take all that you have and be poor. Love someone who does not deserve it. Denounce the government and embrace the flag. Hope to live in that free republic for which it stands. Give your approval to all you cannot understand. Praise ignorance for what man has not encountered, he has not destroyed. Ask the questions that have no answers. Invest in the millennium. Plant sequoias. Say that your main crop is a forest that you did not plant, that you will not live to harvest. Say that the leaves are harvested when they have rotted into the mold. Call that prophet. Prophecy, such returns. Put your faith in the 2 inches of humus that will build under the trees every 1,000 years. Listen to carrion. Put your ear close and hear the fainting chatter of the songs that are to come. Expect the end of the world. Laugh. Laughter is immeasurable. Be joyful, though you have considered all the facts. So long as women do not go cheap for power, please women more than men. Ask yourself, will this satisfy the woman satisfied to bear a child? Will this disturb the sleep of a woman near to giving birth? Go with your love to the fields. Lie down in the shade. Rest your head in her lap. Swear allegiance to what is nighest your thoughts. As soon as the generals and the politicos can predict the motions of your mind, lose it. Leave it as a sign to mark the false trail the way you didn't go. Be like the fox who makes more tracks than necessary, some in the wrong direction. Practice resurrection. That's what I'm interested in doing for the rest of my life. That's all I want to do, is practice resurrection. This man, Wendell Berry, is a modern day prophet, as is Bob Dylan, who asks us, when are we going to wake up? When are we going to wake up? When are we going to wake up and strengthen the things that remain?
Beautiful. Great. Great sentiments from both those poets. Amazing. Steve, thank you so much. This has been a really good conversation. And,
Thank you. I would urge people to take a look at this book. It's a great book.
Democracy. Oh,
yeah.
Sheldon Wolin. Christopher Hedges talks about him quite a lot. And
This Democracy Incorporated, managed democracy and the specter of inverted totalitarianism. This is really an important book. He takes
Yeah, you've got
and
a dog here.
juxtaposes the traditional idea of totalitarianism and how that no longer is playing out, but rather inverted totalitarian is a faceless, corporate, behind the scenes totalitarianism run by people that you never see that are behind the scenes. It's the people of the WEF, the WHO, the Trans-Pacific Partnership, the offshore everybody, the Chinese Communist
globalism in general.
Party, and other people in power, and all of them working in concert to take over the world. And that's what he is worried about in Democracy Incorporated. And I frankly have to say that this is an amazing book. It's so important. And I worry about trickle-down totalitarianism. And I think that Vermonters can do a couple of things.
Trickle down.
Yeah. Trickle-down totalitarianism. See, it starts up here, and then it comes down to us, so that maybe we in Vermont, because we're so totally open, become the petri dish for all of these thoughts that are coming from outside of Vermont. While some of them might be good, their basic idea is to trust the experts. Just trust the experts. We're told to trust the experts, the Anthony Fauci's, for example. He's an expert, so trust the expert. And that's where we have all gone. We've gone down that rabbit hole of trusting the experts rather than our own instincts, and rather our own community. So this is what I would recommend. Number one, that in terms of sovereignty, that Vermont establishes a Vermont state holiday on town meeting day. That is a time when everybody gets to town meeting and that you vote at town meeting. I would urge that we also vote in person. I think we should not have these ballots that happened in COVID. Everybody gets sent a ballot. I know people that have gotten more ballots. And if you're not honest, then you can use those ballots in a negative way. I would say urge that we vote in public and that we retain our meeting house, our public meeting. I'd like to see the meeting house strengthened, all those quote-unquote churches. That's where churches met, in the meeting house, but meeting house also had singing schools, they had quilting, they had food distribution, they had all that stuff. Make those centers of the community again so people can get together and enjoy themselves. I think that you need to have in Vermont a sense of where your money goes. You need to have a box or boxes in Vermont where a portion of what you pay in taxes actually goes to things that you believe they need to go to, not what somebody else is determining they need to go to. I have a box or a number of boxes in there saying, I would like this to go into our farmers. I'm a big supporter of farmers, so I support Someday Farm, and I support Earth Sky Time, which is a wonderful farm, and Clearbrook Farm, and Laughing Child Farm, Did I say Someday Farm? True Love Farm. You just go down the list. All of those farms and our farmers, support them, support regenerative agriculture. So I would put a box in there, support regenerative agriculture, support our small farms, and I would check that off. I would just, that's where I would like a good portion of my money to go. I already spend money there. Those are the places that I prefer to go, but I would urge people to have the opportunity.
That's the 2 inches of hummus in
that's
Wendell's.
That's right, there you go.
Home.
Yeah.
Right.
So I also think we need to look at more direct democracy, that people can actually vote on and have referenda for different things. And I think that's the Swiss way, and it's been very successful. I would use the Swiss model. I have a cousin who actually is developing something software-wise that you can't hack into, that would allow individuals to vote their conscience rather than what has been placed before them by legislators. So those are a couple of things that I would do for Vermont, and I believe that bring up the minimum wage to a livable wage, $23 an hour is starting point. I think that you can look at your 30,000 units that need to be built over the next X amount of years, but by not having so many regulations on your builders and not making it so difficult for permits, and paying people who actually work hard, maybe migrant workers, at least a minimum wage. A livable wage would be perfect for migrants until they become citizens, and they need to have all the rights of a citizen. I think that we have to end the endless wars, and I think that the health issue is primary for us in Vermont, and everything falls under those. That's what I would try to do as a legislator, either as a senator of Vermont going to Washington, D.C., or as a local senator. I just think common sense is important. I think that we should make sure that we don't lose our democracy. So speak up whatever your voice is so that it can be heard. Even if you disagree with everything you've heard from me today, you need to be able to exercise your voice and to be heard, and because your voice is important. And this isn't just a vacant phrase that I'm throwing out there. I just think it really is necessary for us to have our voices heard and not to have our freedoms taken away, those 4 freedoms, and freedom for assembly. And ask yourself, what happens when they say another lockdown's coming? Are you going to say yes to that? Are legislators going to say yes to that? Have another lockdown, put your mask on? Are you going to say yes to that when they come for you? Are you going to let them in? Or are you going to think about it?
Seems like that's an abdication of our own state motto of freedom and unity.
It is an abdication of freedom and unity. Don't give up your freedom, and don't give up your unity of caring for your neighbor. Don't give that up. Just stay on track with those things. That's what I would urge Vermonters, and that's how I'm going to try to live my life when I grow my garden, and with my children and grandchildren. I hope they're going to be able to afford to live in Vermont, and I'd like to see us working toward that direction. And I'm really happy that I had a chance to have this time with you today, Jamie, because I value the time, and I value GNAT and local television. You wouldn't get this if you didn't have local television. This would not be an option for you. And so they make this available, and they have been great to me over the years and supported me, and I have tried to support them. I would urge you to support local television so that you can have your voice heard. And there are
Then
so
maybe
many
that's
topics.
a box. Maybe that's a box that we check also as community
Yes,
TV
exactly
and
right.
community media. Seems like it
I
would
love
be a
that
great,
idea.
regenerative agriculture on one hand, community media on the other. So important to have your voices heard and representative democracy actually made real again. Sounds like so.
I would absolutely say yes to that.
Yeah.
I think
Big plug for community TV out there.
Yeah, and there are all sorts of issues that are coming up. There are things. I looked at the sky yesterday and I saw weird stuff in the sky. The first time I've ever seen it quite like that. And I'm wondering, Now, I've read so much stuff, so I know about Operation Popeye. I know
These
what
are only just 3 of the books. You got like 6 more in your bag.
Yeah, but I have, but you know, this is Alexander Solzhenitsyn. I read this many years ago, but I picked it up again recently.
Warning to the West. It's hard to read. Warning to the West.
Warning to the West. Warning to the West. He told us what to worry about ourselves, and you know his address to Harvard was amazing. I go back to that a lot. I was a very close friend of Richard Wurmbrand, who was tortured for Christ, and he was in Romanian prisons under Ceausescu, and totalitarianism is ugly, and what they did to him was horrible. As a pastor speaking up, he would have been doing what I'm doing today, but he would be thrown in prison. Well, is that day coming? I worry, unless you exercise your freedoms, unless we exercise our freedoms. Richard Wurmbrand, I had his funeral. I also had the funeral for Jim Jeffords. Jim Jeffords put himself in jeopardy when he declared his independence.
Right.
I remember I was in Los Angeles at the time. My closest friends were not white. And one of the guys said to me, he said, "Oh boy, he's in trouble. They're going to come after him. He is really..."
And this was when he defected after the Iraq War away from the Republican Party to become an independent. He wrote that book, My Declaration of Independence. The folks on the right called him Jumpin' Jim, but he stayed to his principles.
He stayed to his principles.
Bottom line.
So he becomes a hero of mine. You know, and before him, John B. Anderson was a hero of mine. I worked on John Anderson's campaign in 1980.
Presidential candidate.
But when Robert F. Kennedy Jr. said, "I declare my independence," I was right with him. Absolutely right with him. And I absolutely 100% agree with declaring your independence. By the way, I wrote to Vermont Digger, and I wrote declaring my independence, and I sent out articles to all the newspapers about declare your independence, talking about how it's being taken over by corporate capture, how our government has bowed down before the corporations, how it's a revolving door, how the Supreme Court with Citizens United has gutted our elections by having dark money come in so you can buy off politicians. I talk about that stuff, and they wouldn't run it, of course. And they eliminated me from discussion so that I couldn't be part of the debate with Bernie and with
multiple
Gerald.
Debates, I understand, right?
Yeah, so so going back to GNAT, thank you, GNAT, for giving me a chance to have my voice heard. And thank you to you, Jamie, for actually spending the time interviewing me today.
Absolutely.
And this is not what you're getting normally. And I would just think if people read Neil Postman, Amusing Yourself to Death, 1980s. Boy, we amused ourselves to death, and this is what we got.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for all your words today, and for representing independent voices, which we've talked about have not been able to see corporate media. They are banished, as you described with yourself and with RFK. And so, you know, yes, thank you, GNAT and Community TV, and anybody who is who wants their voice heard, and we want representative government. Good luck on Tuesday. We have a big election coming up here in just 5 days. We're hoping the word will get out for all independent voices, in addition to those that are funded by the DNC and RNC, and hopefully we have a true American Tuesday here on Election Day next week. Thank you so much, Steve, and good luck with the race. And
I'm just close with, after the election's over, this will give me a chance to go and plant my garlic, which I'm looking forward to. So, yeah, thank you very much. Thank you, GNAT. Thank you, everyone who took the time to watch it today. All the best to you, and vote your conscience. Thanks.